we've got Mr. John Colburn here running for State Representative District 70.
Correct.
Have you run for House before?
I tried in 2022 and was a victim of the two primary rule. And we can go into that more if you like.
I know all about that rule.
Okay.
All right. And you're running on the Republican ballot.
Yes.
What are your best qualifications and experience for this position?
Twofold, really. I think what I think is my most important experience that I bring to the table is 20 plus years as an entrepreneur, understanding what it takes to sign the front of a paycheck as opposed to just the back. I've learned how to make a business work within the myriad of regulations that the government puts in place to try to keep business, small business specifically, from being successful. And I've overcome those and made a number of businesses successful. So I think that's really the biggest asset that I bring. The secondary asset is a conservative, small government, individual-centered outlook on what government's job truly is. I don't believe that government should be telling us what to buy, what to do. They shouldn't be looking over our shoulder. They shouldn't know when we drive down the highway how many times we pass a particular camera. These are things that were not intended for a free society, and that outlook and that perspective, I think, is much in need in the state legislature.
What is your primary motivation for running for the position?
To accomplish exactly what I just spoke about, eliminating an overbearing, intrusive, overtaxing, over-legislating government. Government was not intended to be what it has become, and that's really what I want to do, is roll back the size, the scope, and the size of the Indiana state government.
Would you be willing to commit to full transparency to your constituents, and what does full transparency look like to you as a state rep?
So the first answer is yes, absolutely, unequivocally. And then what does that look like? Well, that looks like the constituents knowing what I'm thinking, what I'm trying to do, and, to a certain extent, who I'm talking to. I think when people who are in positions of approving contracts are seen having coffee with others, that creates a perception of non-transparency. And I think we've seen here locally that can create some issues for us. And everybody knowing what I'm trying to do, who I'm talking to, and what that conversation is trying to accomplish, I think, is vital.
Who are some of your top campaign contributors?
Well, going back to being an entrepreneur, I own an accounting business in Sellersburg, and my top contributors have been my clients. Those are the people besides my wife and kids who know me best and have really stepped up, and instead of just us complaining in a meeting about how the government is stealing their money, they've been willing to step up and provide an avenue to get somebody in that's going to fight for them. Not Meta coming into Riverport. We're fighting for the micro businesses who are 20 plus or minus employees and are the heartbeat of our community.
Have you ever given a campaign contribution back, and if so, why? Generally, we don't need specifics.
I have, and the reason that I did that was people tried to leverage that campaign contribution to elicit a specific action from me and to buy influence, and it's like, that my integrity is not for sale. Here's your money back, and I'll do it again if I have to.
How are you going to ensure the public gets the opportunity to express their desires on a particular topic or bill? How will you communicate with those you represent?
Well, the standards, text, email, telephone calls. I can assure you that I will be available via telephone and text messaging, and my clients and my friends know that already. I think the next step is to go to be available in person. One of the things I've tried to do in my campaign, given that my district covers 4 different counties, is I've tried to have personal meet and greets in each one of those counties on Saturday mornings or even in the evening to give people an opportunity to come in and over a cup of coffee, chit chat about any issues that they're concerned with, or maybe want to change, and I will continue to do that. I don't know a frequency, but I will. I live in Sellersburg. It's easy to find where, so give me a call. Let's over a cup of coffee or over a beer, preferably beer, but whatever. Let's talk about whatever is concerning you.
What regulations, ordinances, or laws do you want to repeal, add, or alter as your first order of business?
The Indiana Department of Education. Does that count? Education is a big thing for me. I have a son that's going to graduate this year. I have a daughter that's in 6th grade, and I see firsthand the shortcomings that our educational system really is. The relationship between the teachers and the parents has been severed, and unelected bureaucrats and administrators have inserted themselves into that relationship, and that's a relationship that needs to be restored. And real quick story, and you can edit it out if you want, but I was in 4th grade, and I'll try not to tear up, but I was in 4th grade, and it was my birthday, September 13th. And, I have my little birthday party, all my friends over, and we are doing, 4th grade kids stuff for a birthday party. And all my friends leave, and I'm sitting there playing with my toys and stuff. And my mom gets a telephone call. And I can tell that as my mom is talking on the telephone, she's getting angrier and angrier. And I'm like, glad I'm not that person. Well, she hands the phone to my father. My father has a 30-second conversation with this person, says, "Thank you, I will take care of it," and hangs up. Well, it turns out that was my 4th grade teacher. Called my parents and said, "Your little son is failing everything except spelling, and he has a solid D in spelling." So, to make a long story short, it was that night, it was that telephone call from that teacher that changed my life. And it's those relationships that teachers and parents create that put a man on the moon in 1969. What have we done since then? When we created the Department of Education in 1977 under Jimmy Carter, education has done nothing but decline. We've become one of the worst educated people or citizenry in the industrialized world. And my first business was a pizza business in Henryville, and I hired seniors in high school and people who had just recently graduated from high school. They couldn't calculate sales tax. Now, I have seen kids who are in that same situation today. They'll go into a store, there will be a 15% sale off a $10 pair of jeans, let's say. And they'll say, "John, how much is this discount?" It's 15% of $10, for God's sakes. And when we are turning out kids that can't calculate 15% of $10, we have failed our kids, we have failed the future, and the way to return is reestablishing that parent-teacher relationship and getting administrators and bureaucrats out of the way.
What is your position on property tax relief, particularly for the elderly and disabled on a fixed income?
In short, we shouldn't be paying rent to the government for homes that we're purchasing. And more specifically, everybody who is 65 years old and older, they need to be exempt from all property tax. They have done their bit for God and country, and they've worked a lifetime to purchase their homes, and they should not have to continue to pay rent to the government for the privilege of living in a home they've purchased. And we can extend that to disabled people, people on a fixed income. The government has enough ways to raise revenue without trying to exploit the elderly and the handicapped.
Along those same lines, how do you feel about ever-increasing property taxes for homeowners at the same time the government is awarding tax abatements for businesses and developers? What will you do at a legislative level in this area?
Well, I think step number one is step 1A and step 1B. Step 1A might be to eliminate the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. I mean, this is an unelected bureaucracy on the same level as the FBI, the NSA, and the CIA. They're all the same, except ours has 4 letters. And they spend and do things in the name of the taxpayer, where the taxpayer has no direct voice in their activities. And so we need to eliminate that sort of thing. Secondly, we need to let the free market work. And what I mean by that is, if we create a perfect infrastructure type community, businesses are going to want to migrate to that community, and that community will create its own entrepreneurs who will start their own businesses and grow their businesses. And if we have an infrastructure, and I'm obviously roads and things like that is infrastructure, but I'm also talking about an excellently educated population. If a guy opens a pizza restaurant, he needs to have a high level of confidence that the seniors that he hires understand how to calculate sales tax. And if he does, and if the seniors can do that, then that's just going to naturally create more jobs. It's going to bring more jobs to the area. It's going to create a better standard of living, and people are going to want to migrate to that area naturally, not having to be bought off by tax abatements that is really just transferring the tax burden from the businesses to the individual. And I heard stories about, and I don't know that this is true, but there was a large retail company that was given a huge tax abatement to move to Clarksville. And, if that company sees that moving to Clarksville is an economic benefit for them, then they should want to do it without having to make the taxpayers foot the bill.
What is your position on border control, and what role do you think Indiana should play in securing our borders, if any?
Again, I think that's a two-pronged answer. First, I think this governor has started in the right direction by sending the Indiana National Guard to Texas. I'm not sure what their role is, but I think that their role probably needs to be more active in preventing border crossings. And I'm sure there are reasons that can't be done on some level. But more importantly, and more locally, I think that the governor should use all of his police powers, whether it be the National Guard, the Indiana State Police, or local law enforcement, to, if they find someone who is in the country illegally, and by consequence in the state of Indiana illegally, and by definition therefore a criminal, relieve them of their Hoosier residency, whether it's cart them over to Illinois or send them back to Mexico, wherever they came from. But that is what we need to do. If they're criminals, and if they're here illegally, they are by definition a criminal. They need to be deported immediately.
Do you think our elections, particularly the machines and other internet-connected equipment, are secure, free, and equal? If not, what actions will you take to secure our elections during your term in office?
I think that it was Representative Larissa Sweet that introduced some legislation in this term to transfer all of our state elections to paper ballots and hand counts. I think paper ballots 100% has to be done. Hand counting, the logistics to me seems overwhelming, but if we could hand count the paper ballots, that would be ideal. But regardless, if we can put a man on the moon, we can create a machine that can add 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, right? And it doesn't have to be connected to the internet, and it doesn't have to have a proprietary software in it that none of us can see. It's a scanner. It scans the piece of paper, looks for a marking. We add 1 to the total. And we could even go as far as to have tally boards that a candidate has 100 votes, the paper goes through, now he has 101, and it's up on the board. No secrecy, no hidden agendas, no proprietary software that can't be looked at by the voter.
Have you familiarized yourself with globalist agendas such as the World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030, and what will you do to preserve America First initiatives?
I am familiar with it, and I am familiar that the current governor has a very intimate relationship with the World Economic Forum, and I'm also aware that part of his toolbox for implementing those agendas is the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. So I think eliminating that is step one. Ensuring that governments do not leverage their monetary abilities to short circuit the free market in buying land is another. And for example, when solar companies come in to purchase farmland to put in solar farms, there's an argument that says, well, the farmer who owns the land should be able to do with his land what he wants. And if he wants to sell it to someone that wants to put in a solar farm, he should be able to do that. And I agree with that 110%, provided that the solar company is having to earn the money that they're using to buy the land, as opposed to getting a grant from either a state government or a federal government that short circuits the free market. So where if I'm trying to buy that land to create a factory to make a widget, I can afford to pay, and I'm just picking a number here, $2,000 an acre. And this solar company who is short circuiting the free market and has unlimited access to funds comes in and offers $2 million an acre, then that short circuits the free market. It perpetuates the World Economic Forum agenda, perpetuates the governor's agenda, perpetuates the Indiana Economic Development Corporation's agenda, and short circuits the free market. That is wrong on all levels. If a person wants to start a solar business, great. Start it on a level playing field just like every other entrepreneur, and don't expect taxpayer subsidies and government handouts to make your job easier.
The recent push for solar farms threatens land that is uniquely rich for crops and livestock, with energy outputs far inferior to other sources such as coal, natural gas, and oil. What's your position on industrial solar farms taking thousands of acres of primary farmland out of production for decades and possibly forever in Indiana's 9th District?
Well, I'm sure that we all open our electric bills every month, whether we open them in an email or physically open them. And you can see the results of the success of solar farms. And I say that tongue-in-cheek because we all know that our utility costs are skyrocketing to where it's essentially making all of us more poor. And here's another story. Right? My wife loves this show from the 1980s called Dallas. Okay, and you guys might remember it, you might not. But there was a particular episode where I think his name is Patrick Ewing, the younger brother, the non-JR. character, was almost bankrupting Ewing Oil to purchase, get it, wait for it, solar panels. He was going to get into the solar business, okay? This was 1982, okay? 40 some odd years ago, right? And here we are still trying to create something that doesn't exist. And that is a solar panel that can substitute for coal, natural gas, or nuclear. And it doesn't work. It's never, I'm not going to say it's never going to work, but with the current technology, no matter how efficient you make it, on an industrial, nationwide scale, it will not work. If you want to put it on your garage to run your freezer, great. But it's not going to generate what's needed for an entire society to survive.
Currently, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, funded by billions in tax dollars, is planning 11 business deals with Chinese companies worth an estimated $14.4 billion. The IEDC uses code names to shroud these companies in secrecy until deals are completed. Both the state Senate and House are to vote on the bill limiting foreign ownership of Hoosier land. What is your position on preventing or allowing foreign companies, especially from communist countries, from buying land here in Indiana?
Again, we go straight back to the free market. If a company is playing on a level field with other businesses and is willing to spend $1, $2 more per acre to buy land, then maybe that's the free market working. But in this case, that is not what we have. What we have are foreign governments and our state government colluding to short circuit the free market and to steal our land. And I hope that the state legislature will stand up to the governor and his pet projects and not allow this kind of thing to happen. And I would not allow, if I was your state legislature, I promise you I would vote against any kind of deal with a Chinese-owned company with unlimited funds and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation short-circuiting the free market.
Switching gears, if Indiana finds itself in another situation of government overreach like we experienced during the COVID pandemic, where the people have their most basic freedoms and constitutional rights threatened, and separation of powers, separation of powers are not being honored, what immediate actions will you take to protect your constituents?
There's a number of actions. First, I would work to call a special session of the legislature to stop this overreach and the power grab. And then secondly, I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once. And there should be ways to impeach such a governor. I don't know how you would do that because it's not a crime or a misdemeanor, but it kind of is a crime because you're stealing the most precious of God-given rights away from individuals. And when you have a governor that is trying to keep you from going to church, but says you can go to the liquor store, you know, where's the rationale? And did I answer that question? Or?
You did, yeah.
Okay.
What's your current understanding of human trafficking in southern Indiana, and what actions, if any, have you taken or plan to take to combat human trafficking?
My level of information on human trafficking is low. Okay, I'm not an expert. But I think if we had closed borders and we did not allow people who were here illegally to wander freely on our streets, that the human trafficking problem would be greatly reduced. Now, I don't know the procedures or how human trafficking is done. I don't know that. But by following the laws of our border and keeping illegals, criminals, from being able to transport children unencumbered, that sounds like a good start to me.
Okay. Here locally, former Sheriff Jamie Knoll is accused of, not found guilty but charged with, some pretty serious crimes against taxpayers: buying and selling cars and other expensive equipment for his own personal gain, using poorly supervised jail commissary funds to pay for unauthorized items, and other crimes committed by finding loopholes in government systems and processes. Do you have any ideas about what laws could be in place to prevent similar crimes from happening again?
The short answer is no. I don't understand, what laws we could implement to keep someone like him from doing these alleged things again. But here's what I do know is we don't put locks on our doors to keep criminals out. We put locks on our doors to keep honest people honest. And we had locks on our doors. They didn't work. These locks include the checks and balances that the various other elected officials in Clark County and Floyd County should have been watching. When you have a obligation to look at financial reports from a business that you have signed a contract to do business with, you should look at those financials. And when you try to and they say they're not available or I'm not giving them to you, see, to me, that's a red flag. And it's at that point that that person breached the contract and we stop. But that was allowed to go on for a decade. And so even though, some of these entities and individuals may not be legally culpable, I think from a moral situation perspective, they certainly had an obligation to step up and ask questions and, jump up and down, wave their arms saying, hey, you owe us financials. Where are they? And they did not do that.
We've discovered that there are laws that require government departments to complete certain fiscal reports, but they don't have repercussions for compliance failures. Would you support legislation that adds repercussions to laws on fiscal report and budget requirements if they are not followed?
Absolutely. Why have a law without any teeth, right? If you break a law, there are repercussions, civil or criminal. And in this case, if they're refusing to provide financial reports, then there has to be repercussions.
What has been your current communication with the Clark County and district chairman, if any? How would you describe your relationship with the Clark County and district central committees? And do you think you have their support as a candidate?
Communication has been minimal, I think. They're accessible and friendly. Do I have their support as a candidate? They're letting me on the ballot this time, so that's a huge step in the right direction. But I think rightfully so, they have to take somewhat of a hands-off approach because I am running against a Republican incumbent. So I think maybe they're playing their cards the way they should. I don't know.
What other issues are important to you that we didn't cover?
What other issues? Well, we've covered the free market. We've covered education. We've covered property taxes. I think that, just kind of to summarize, reducing the size, the scope, and the overreach of the state government has got to be a paramount objective to the state legislature going forward. The last two budgets have been the two largest budgets in our state's history, which to me is only indicative that we have a legislature and a governor that overtaxes, overspends, and over-legislates. And we need to turn that back. And the last thing, the other thing would be the Second Amendment. Even though that is a U.S. constitutional item, I think state government plays a key role in protecting that right. And the Second Amendment was not created to allow people to hunt or as a backdoor support for outdoorsmen. It was created for two things. One was allow the individual to protect themselves their family, and their property. And 2 was to provide for the ultimate backstop against a government that's, imposing tyranny and despotism on the citizens. So, and I think state government has a vital role to play in protecting those rights.
Have you thought about what committees you want to be on and why?
No. But I think no, I haven't. What is it? Ways and Means is for the taxing thing, maybe? I don't know.
I'm not the expert there.
Yeah. So I guess the short answer is no.
Okay.
But if you put me on the educational committee, I can promise you that every year that I am on that committee, I will introduce a bill to eliminate the Department of Education.
Okay. What do you have that your opponent doesn't have? What do you bring to the table?
I think the biggest thing is a fire in the belly, so to speak. I am committed to reducing the size of government. I am committed to doing the right thing as far as our endowed rights. I will fight to protect those. I will fight to roll back the size of government, and I'll fight to expand our rights. And when to expand our rights means we have to roll back some of the intrusive laws that have been passed and we're experiencing right now. Flock cameras. And my opponent does not have that. She, I think, is content with the way things are. She's content with the type of legislation and the size of government going forward, and I am not. That's the biggest difference.
As a citizen action group, we believe in citizen participation at every level. How can your constituents help you achieve shared goals? What support do you need?
Well, it's a political campaign, so you got the standard fare. Help knocking on doors, talking to your neighbors, and the thing that I would love to do is if individuals would open up their home to a coffee, and just invite the neighbors on every side and across the street, and we could sit down over a cup of coffee and just talk about what's important and give people an opportunity to get to know me and how committed I am to making our government smaller and expanding your rights.
How can voters learn more about you, support your campaign, and get in touch with you?
We have a website, colburn4inhouse.com. My last name, the number 4, letters IN, the word house.com. We're on Facebook at Colburn, the number 4, Indiana House. And then you can call me on my cell phone. Can I say that here?
Sure.
502-654-3379. Call or text. And then if you would like to contribute financially, obviously we will accept that as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. That's all we've got.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.